Welcome to the Insomnia Project. Sit back, relax, and listen as we have a calm conversation about the mundane. I appreciate all our listeners who've reached out to us in the last little bit with your thoughts and your social media. We're going to be talking about social media today, and I want to thank you. I'm Marco Timpano, and joining me today is a dear friend who's been on the podcast before, and I want to welcome them back. I'm in Ottawa in a hotel room. They're in Toronto. This is Alene Degian. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. And Marco, I just want to say you pronounce my last name like a true Armenian would pronounce my last name.
I do my best. I'm always so petrified of saying, especially friends' names wrong. Sometimes I'll say Amanda's name wrong, and it just comes out of my mouth how it comes out. So I apologize, Alene.
And how many years have you guys been married?
Oh, 13. I've known her more than that. So,
right.
I always get,
okay, so I take no offense because...
But do you ever get that? Like, I'll often get this. Yeah. People will call me Mario. And I have just introduced myself as Marco, and they'll be Mario. And I'm like, no, it's Marco. My friends get more upset about that than
mine
I do.
Too.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
I get a lot. I get Eileen a lot, which I find is difficult, I guess, because it's Eileen is spelled A-I-L-E. Yeah. Eileen is such a specific spelling. Mm-hmm. And I get Arlene because people see A-L-E-N-E and they assume that there's an R. And I think Arlene, I'll probably correct somebody, but Eileen, I get really uncomfortable because I'm like, I don't know. And so the way I try to do it is this is going to sound ridiculous, but I try to incorporate my name into conversation. Like, for example, my mom was saying the other day, Alene, if you don't XYZ, this blah, blah, blah. Like I try to really... I don't know, that was probably a terrible example.
No, it's great.
You get the point. Like I really try to bring it up so that they can hear it.
The only time I correct people is if they call me Mark as opposed to Marco. Yeah. That's when I correct them. Just because I don't hear it as my name and people want to anglicize it. And it's like, no, my name is Marco. There's a vowel there.
Do people call you that as like a short form? Or?
Sometimes it's usually people who just know me, or sometimes when I'm being introduced. So I do some podcast workshops, and there was one particular person who was introducing me, and they introduced me twice as Mark. It's so great to have Mark here, Mark. And then I did exactly what you did. And I just started by saying, okay, so I'm happy to be here. My name is Marco Timpano, and here's some of my things. Good. And then I just kind of set the stage, and then they came and apologized to me. And I said, it's all good. It's all good.
Yeah.
I didn't want to correct you while you were doing it, but
I know it's so uncomfortable. Right? So this is kind of a funny story in terms of like mistaking someone's name. Years and years ago, when my brother and my sister-in-law got engaged, they had an engagement party, and we had the priest from our church come to bless the dinner.
Yes.
And he got her name wrong. Her name is Dina, and he called her Diana. So he was blessing the table, and he said, Aaron and Diana. And my brother luckily was like, it's Dina, jumped in because I just thought it was so weird. You're blessing the table. And so after that, I was like, okay, so anybody could mess up anybody's name.
What's your Starbucks name?
Nicole.
Is it Nicole?
Yeah, my middle name.
That's what you give them?
Always. Starbucks, any order, anything. I always go with Nicole.
I say Marco. And 9 out of 10 times they write Markle, like sparkle. And so it's so much so that my listeners will often write to me as Markle as opposed to Sparkle. Yeah, but because I've told them many times, my Starbucks name is Markle, like sparkle, like Meghan Markle.
That's hilarious.
I think it's just the way I say my name. I say it quick, and what they hear as opposed to Marco, they hear Markle.
Yeah.
So they write
Markle.
That's
so funny.
That's why
do you have a way that you introduce yourself if people are like Marco? I feel like that's not a really difficult name to confuse, but like I have an explanation to my name to help people pronounce it.
I'd love to know that.
I usually say Alene, like one single lean back, like Alene versus two leans or three leans.
Alene, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes
I joke that Fat Joe wrote a whole song about me. I try to really jazz it up a little, but
I'll say Marco, like Marco Polo.
That's good.
Oftentimes it'll curb them from saying polo, because when my name is said, I'll say polo, because there's that water sport game where they do that. And it's like, that one drives me a little bit crazy. Not because I have a problem with the Explorer or that particular game, it's because I've never played it as a kid. So for me, it's a very weird thing to imagine every time you ran into someone and they said their name was like, John, and then you just said another famous person, John Adams, and they're like, no, my name is John. But imagine you did that every time you met someone and you just associated their, that's what happens. I always get associated with the one Marco they know, which is the Explorer from Venice, right?
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Especially if you haven't played the game as a kid.
Right. It upsets it. Once again, it gets my friends much more upset than it does to me.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is. Before we go any further, another reason, okay, we both love to travel.
Yeah.
We both love coffee. Where's the most recent trip you went to?
The most recent, I went to Europe for 2.5 weeks. So I did Portugal and Spain.
Yeah. And
it was
how was
incredible.
The coffee?
I find the coffee in Spain is really good.
Yeah.
I loved it. Because it always café con leche.
Yes.
And it was amazing. So
they warm the milk. They warm the milk. And it makes everything stay warm and delicious.
And I don't know if it's also sweeter. I don't know if I'm making that up, but I just felt like the coffee was sweeter. Right. I don't know. It's not confirmed, but for me, it was amazing. And the beauty of this trip was the first half, the Portugal half was I had a wedding to go to. So everything was pretty... there was an itinerary.
Sure.
We had to be in the specific town on the Monday and then the Tuesday and the Wednesday. It just was kind of really organized. And I don't really like to travel that way. I really like to have time in my schedule. But when we did Spain, all we had was a flight into Madrid. And then 8 days later, we had a flight out of Valencia. So those 8 days we hadn't booked a single place to stay.
I love it.
We hadn't booked any flights anywhere. We had a rough idea of where we wanted to go, obviously, so that we could know, worst case, we're going to go here and then we'll go to Valencia this way. But while we were there, we spoke to my brother who had gone on a bachelor trip years ago. And he said, where are you guys going? This and that. And he said, you have to go to this one island if you have time. And we said, we have time. We have nothing but time. We have nothing planned. And we ended up very last minute booking a flight from Madrid to Ibiza, taking a boat from Ibiza to this tiny island.
What's the island our listeners will want to know?
It's called Formentera.
Okay.
It's about half an hour. It's a half-hour boat ride from Ibiza. And there were apparently these are where the soccer teams go. We saw yachts that were bigger than any house I've ever seen in my life. And it was just 3 days of pure relaxation.
Amazing.
Because there was really nowhere to go or nothing to do. So,
wow. So you would recommend this island?
I would, yeah. Okay. A lot of people don't go and stay. We didn't know. So we did stay for 3 days, but I would have rathered that than I guess go to Ibiza because it's so crazy expensive. And I think we just did it.
It's more of a party island.
Yeah.
So let me get this straight. It's a great place to relax.
Yeah.
Holidays.
It just was a really nice, there wasn't places to go. It's not that one of those, when you go to Formentera, you have to see this or you have to go here. It's just essentially a big boardwalk of restaurants that we went to. There was one beach that we went to at the very last day that was, you were swimming essentially among yachts.
Oh.
So if you're into manifestation and visualizations, that's the place to go to kind of visualize a rich life.
Can I also just say, I think our listeners would love to follow you on Instagram because you post very positive things and really beautiful, relaxing things. I find your posts are very uplifting.
Oh, thanks. That's really nice to hear. That's kind of the message that I want to always send out.
Can we share your Instagram?
Yeah. So my personal Instagram is Alene Degian. So it's just ALENE DEGIAN.
And listeners, it'll be in the show notes, so don't worry if you didn't catch that.
And if you're looking for a social media manager, it's called
Which is what I wanted to
Creative. Yeah. So shameless plug-in.
No, I want to talk about that. So your new business is called And Creative.
Yes.
Tell us about it. And first, where does the name come from? Because the name is awesome.
Okay, thank you. So A and D are my initials, Alene Nicole Degian. But before I was even thinking that I want to just do my initials, I was like, I feel like I need to bring more meaning to the name. And so right now I just do social media management. However, my big vision for my brand and myself is that I become a personal brand. And so I'm seeing it as if I do social media management and social media consulting and this and that. And I just slowly use it as a way to grow my business.
Amazing.
So, because I love a little bit of everything. I mean, I feel like as actors, we often are multi-passionate people.
Yes.
So I kind of want to use my brand to embody all of that.
So when you say social media management, if I'm a listener right now, and I'm like, I want somebody to help me with my social media management.
Right.
What do you do? And I need to say this before we even start, is that do you do it for international clients in case there's an international listener? Okay, great.
So that's the beauty of this is that it's fully remote. So I can work in Toronto, and I've worked with brands that are in the UK, and I've worked with people in the Philippines. Like, you're kind of all over.
Right.
It's not that we have to even be on the same timeline. Like, I could do my work and pass it over to you as the brand to review it and say, okay, great. And we would get to an arrangement that says, okay, I finish my work by this day so that you have ample time to review it. And then we post it for your followers in that sense. So there's two aspects of my business. One is social media management, that if someone has a social media page like Instagram or Facebook or TikTok, Twitter, whatever the case, I help them manage their online presence. So by creating graphics for them, writing copy for them, doing a bit of engagement for them. People comment on their posts saying, congratulations, that's so awesome. Or where can I get that? And I'm the one behind the screen going, thank you, and telling them exactly. So that's one aspect of it. And it's all about what that individual brand's goals are. So some people just want somebody, they don't have the time and they don't care about growing on social media. They just want to have an active presence. And they're like, I just need somebody to, talk to people. If somebody comments, manage my messages, post a few times a week, and that's it. And then there's other people that outright want to grow. There's some people that have programs or courses that they want to sell. I want to drive traffic to my website. And so I work with people specifically on their goals. It's not that I offer a single package to say, okay, you need this and you need this. I try to really personalize it. Mm-hmm. And the second half is I realize that social media management is an investment. Right. And there are people that may have the time, but they don't have the knowledge to post on their own. Or maybe they don't feel comfortable fully passing it over to someone. I don't think that you can get my tone of voice, or maybe it's confidential information. I don't know, whatever the case is. And I have consulting. So I would look at your page and see, okay, what's working and what's not working based on your analytics. Let's come up with a few content pillars so that you know what to post on what day, and it takes the thought out of it.
It's so great.
Right? So for you, Marco, you are a podcaster, you're an actor, and then you're also a life lover, So one post a week could be a snippet of your podcast. The other post the next day could be maybe a show you're loving, a show you would love to be in, a show you're rehearsing for, something you're writing, anything to do with your performing world. And then the third one is just, here's my favorite coffee shop of the week, shop of the week, great meal of the week. This is what brought me joy this week. This is what I've been loving. And that kind of would be your overall thing, right? So people can connect with you based on different types of content you have.
I love it. I love it. This is so helpful.
Yeah,
and I'm sorry about the squeaky chair, listeners. I happen to be in a chair squeaking, and there's people on my floor that seem to like to bang doors. So you're probably hearing that. What is the one tip or one thing you would say to the casual person who doesn't have a business, but who's a regular person who just wants to do better at their social media? Is there a tip you would give them?
So I would say be as don't try to be a person that you're not on social media.
Okay.
Because social media is a little bit of a wormhole that you can get sucked into very easily. Mm-hmm. And I think that if you're not sharing from a place that is authentic to you, you're going to get burnt out very fast.
Right.
And you're also, social media is trying to find your social community.
Right.
So you have there's more longevity if you are posting as yourself, as authentically as possible.
Right.
Because then in that sense, you're also going to find your people. You're going to find the people that resonate the most with you, connect the most to you, relate to you, all of that stuff. If you're playing this character, be prepared to play the character forever, because that's the community that you're building.
Is it fair to say to our listeners, don't be afraid to unfollow and block if it doesn't serve you?
Of course.
Okay.
So I have this rule.
Oh, I love this.
Over the years, I'm sure as actors, you've met a million people, and social media is one of the easiest ways to stay connected without exchanging phone numbers, emails, whatever the case. And so you collect all of these people that you've met one time, and you just don't care, for lack of a better term, I guess, about what they're up to.
Sure. Or
maybe it affects you in some way that you don't want to see their content, right?
Right.
So the way I like to do it is if I would see this person on the street and not say hi to them, I'll unfollow them.
There you go.
If I would see this person, if I don't want to see someone's content, but if I saw them at a party, I saw them on the street, I would have to say hi to them.
Yes.
I mute them. So
what do you mean by mute them?
Mute them. You can mute a social media page. So if you are tired of seeing my content, you can go to my page and press mute so that you no longer see my stories, my feed posts, but it still shows that you're following me.
And there's nothing wrong with that, folks.
Nothing wrong with that.
And I feel like you and I connect in this way because I do follow your social media, and I do feel like even though we don't see each other every day, and we met through work because we're both performers, but I really enjoy your social media.
Thank you. Thanks.
You and I both connect in the same way with imposter syndrome because I've heard you talk about it.
Yeah.
And that's why I bring it up. In my book that I wrote, 25 Things I Wish I Knew About Podcasting Before I Start My Podcast, the longest title in the world. I don't even think I got it right, actually, to tell you the truth. But I have a whole chapter on imposter syndrome and how it affected me and how I was able to change my mindset to be like, you know what, when I get that feeling of imposter syndrome is the moment I know that I should be doing that thing.
Yes.
That my inner self is telling me that I might not be good enough.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see how you deal with imposter syndrome or what your thoughts are on that topic.
So I think that imposter syndrome is so normal. And I think if you don't feel imposter syndrome, it's almost worse because we feel imposter syndrome because we're aware of what is possible. Like we're watching somebody do it and you think, oh my gosh, I can't do that. But there's that awareness piece. That's why I think we feel imposter syndrome. I'm no doctor. I'm not anything. This is just obviously purely my experience with it.
Right.
And so when I feel imposter syndrome, I try to take a break. I try to take a step back, fully just take a step back and think, okay, why am I feeling imposter syndrome? And then I try to think of all the things I've done up until that point that have brought me to this. So I want to say me starting my own business, huge imposter syndrome. I feel like I'm still dealing with it, to be honest. Like I launched it last week and I'm still, it took me so long to even launch it because I thought, who is going to want to hire me?
And the second I saw it, I thought there's no one better to hire. And look how gorgeous this launch is and your website and all that.
How crazy. We're looking at the exact same thing and having two totally different experiences. But then there's a quote that I love that says there's people with half your talent doing twice as much.
Right.
Because they just believe that they can.
Yeah.
So I think that the way I deal with it is just to, I like what you said even too, that if you're dealing with imposter syndrome, that's probably the thing you should be doing. So I found me even sharing my business, I was feeling so much resistance that, oh my gosh, old bosses are going to talk about me, or
Right.
people I've worked with, or maybe people in that I used to know as an actor are saying, oh, what's she doing now? Why is
Right.
she doing that? And I thought, you have to do this. Just
Yeah.
press publish. Just do it.
Or who gives you the right to
Yeah.
talk about this? And it's like, hang on. So my thing is, so my background in theater is improv. That's sort of my strength. And when I was doing these improv shows, there's this thing where the improviser can jump in and cut off what two other people are doing and start a new scene, right?
Yes.
And I always used to be very hesitant to go in. So my body would have the impetus to go forward, but my mind would stop me. And I had an instructor say once, Marco, why? I see you in the back there, like you're going to go in and then you stop yourself. I'm like, yeah, I don't want to ruin what's happening there. I don't want my fellow performers to think I'm interrupting their talent. And they said, no, that's the impetus of when you should go in, because your performers can always come back to that scene. There's no judgment. You're making more judgment than anyone else. You're creating a story in your head that no one else is creating. And so whenever I had that feeling, I imagine an invisible hand pushing me forward to go in.
I love that.
And so that became my thing, with this invisible hand pushing me forward, this invisible hand pushing me forward. And I use that to this day, this invisible hand, when I think I'm not supposed to be doing it or not good enough or something, the invisible hand makes me go forward and I just do it. So
I love that idea.
Before we go to your podcast, what is how can people contact you at And Creative?
So you can either contact me through my Instagram page at It's And Creative. Send me a message on there. I'm happy to respond. Or we have my website and I have a whole contact form on there, AleneDegian.com. And
I'll make sure that's on our show notes, folks.
Yeah. So I have a contact form, so I can, send me a message through there. If you want to book a meeting, there's a meeting link. So you can just say, you know what, I'm not going to write an email. I just want to book a meeting with her.
There you go.
And I love that. And so you can book it through my Calendly. It's all on there. You can even message me on my personal Instagram. If that's the only one that you remember, I'm totally happy.
There you go. There you go, folks.
Yeah.
Now, that brings me to your podcast.
Yes.
So I need to set up your podcast.
Okay.
Because a lot of people, this podcast here, the Insomnia Project, is to help people find their way to sleep. Some people use it to help with their anxiety.
I love that.
And some people will use it to listen to in the morning as they get ready, even though it's meant for sleep, because we're just talking about calm things. So it's conversation that they can listen to. For those people, I would say your podcast would be a great podcast to listen to when you just want to hear lovely conversation, or you want to hear conversation and just enjoy the people speaking. So your podcast is called the Accidental Friends Podcast.
Yes, that's right.
So tell me about your podcast.
Okay. So we started it in 2021. My friend and I had always talked about starting a podcast because we come from two very, very different backgrounds.
This is
very
Kristen Mandela.
Yes. And I grew up in a strict Armenian household that the premise of you're not going to get married, you don't date until you get married kind of thing, like that joke.
Sure.
And she grew up in an incredibly liberal family. And that, she never had a curfew. She was like, it just didn't matter. And so we became friends, I say later in our life, at around the age of like 25, 26. But we are really good friends because we just respect each other's opinion.
Sure.
And it doesn't matter that our views on one topic are different. It just kind of shows that two people can have different ideas around the same thing, but you can just have a respectful conversation about it. And so we thought we'd create this podcast and put these conversations out there. And it's been really, really cool because we get messages saying, I'll get messages and she'll get messages saying, oh my gosh, I totally relate to you. I grew up in the same house I grew up in the same way you did. I had a curfew at 18, blah, 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 all this stuff. And it's so awesome to hear. And then Kristen will also get messages saying, oh my gosh, I grew up like you,
Right.
this and that. And we'll get people writing questions for us to answer as these armchair experts. Like we have
Right.
no true expertise. We're just two 30-somethings like trying to live our lives and figure it out.
Mhm.
And it's been really fun.
Isn't it funny when you get responses from people who listen and you're like, I didn't realize, like, they'll do things that you've said on the air and they'll commit to it. And you're like, oh my goodness, I was just saying it casually. And then they're like, we really enjoyed that. Now we do it. Like Amanda talked about. I don't know if you have. So this, in all fairness, this is not something I do. It kind of grosses me out, but it's something my wife does. And one of our listeners, like, it changed my life. So I don't know if you have a frother. We have an Arancino that froths the milk that we use for our cappuccinos at home.
Okay.
So it basically, you put milk in it, it'll spin and froth and warm it at the same time.
Right.
Well, Amanda will take coffee that she hasn't drank, put it in the fridge, and then she'll throw it in that with milk so it warms and heats her coffee from before and froths it. And she loves that. One of our listeners was like, that changed my life. I do that too now. And I'm like, that is something I would never do, but
this is paining me to listen to.
So glad that it's working for you, right? And we'll say things like that all the time. I'll just casually drop something and somebody will be like, actually, I started to do that and it really works for me. And I'm like, wow. I think it's incredible how you can touch people's lives, right?
It's insane. And I think what's crazy is that I had someone that I met almost 10 years ago, 2013, and we haven't seen each other since. We did like a school program together abroad once. And she messaged me saying, I just wanted to say thank you for your podcast. I listened to it on my drive. I listen to it when I'm working, and it makes me feel like I'm with friends, just having a conversation. And we've gotten so many little messages like that by people. Because in your head, and I'm sure you think of this too sometimes, that you think it's just your immediate family and your friends listening to it. You go, who's actually listening to this thing, Yeah. And then you'll get these messages and think, oh, it's reaching a lot more people than I expected.
Yeah.
And it's just such a cool feeling.
For me as a podcaster, I'm always thrilled when I have friends who do podcasts, especially talented friends like yourself. Mm-hmm. And so I always try to listen because I feel like, there's a bit of an obligation there. I'm a podcaster. My friends have podcasts I want to support. And then I know it's a great podcast when I get hooked or when there's moments in that make me laugh or feel like I'm in the company of friends, like you said. Yeah. So I invite our listeners who are like, I'm looking for a show that won't put me to sleep, but will certainly make me feel like I'm listening to a conversation that's not going to rock my world in a negative way, but support what I'm doing. So I really recommend Accidental Friends Podcast.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. No, it's been a really fun time.
And please give your regards from our podcast to Kristen Mandela, your co-host on that. She's awesome too. Yeah.
She'll love it. She gets, we also think it's a lot of like women that listen to our podcast. We always think, oh, it's just a couple of women. And then we'll meet men who listen to it and we go, it is predominantly women. If you look at our analytics and all of that, for sure. But the fact that men also listen to it, you think like, this is very cool. It's very cool to hear too.
Also, it's for any age, not just in your age bracket. I would imagine like people who are older or younger are going to enjoy what's going on.
I think it's always interesting because my mom listens to it, as support.
Sure.
And we always have a conversation about it, or she'll mention it after the fact. And she'll go, I never thought about that before. That really made me think about this way. Or because she grew up the same way I did, just more strict.
Sure.
Right? Like every generation is kind of like less strict and less strict, And so she'll think, oh, I never really thought about that. And I go, that's the point. That's the whole dang point.
It certainly makes you think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so great.
It's really fun. Yeah, I do love it a lot.
Alene, I have to say, like, this time has gone so quickly.
I know.
But thank you for sharing everything that you have going on. Do you have anything that you're doing for fun that's coming up? Travel, coffee related, anything that you want to share with us?
Oh my gosh.
I know I'm just throwing it out there.
You know what's actually super interesting? A friend of mine called me the other day saying that she just got 2 tickets to a fado concert in Toronto.
To a what concert?
It's traditional Portuguese singing, like traditional Portuguese throat singing.
Okay.
And she was on a wait list for a while and got, I guess she got taken off the wait list. And she thought, who is going to enjoy this or who's going to appreciate it? And so she called me saying, hey, please tell me you're free this night because I just got taken off the wait list. I got these 2 tickets. Wow. Do you want to go? And of course I'm going to go. So I'm doing that tomorrow night.
Isn't that fascinating how music can transcend language?
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much for being such a wonderful guest on the podcast.
Thanks, Marco. I loved being here.
So great. And folks, thank you for listening. If you have a podcast recommendation or if you have anything that has come to light as you've listened to this particular episode, or if you fell asleep 3 minutes in, that's even great. We always say
amazing.
It's the one podcast we hope you never get to the end of. Until next time, we hope you were able to listen and sleep.